So last year, we saw how far we could push Marasmus. I mean, he won't stop respawning, so let's make him wish he would. But it was the prior year's boss that introduced the mechanic that each time it respawns, it levels up. Marasmus might have refined it, but Monoculus was the first one to do it. So naturally, that means we need to find out what is the highest level we can get Monoculus to in TF2. Hey, that's the name of the video. And as you can imagine, the first 3 rounds are super easy. Every time he spawns, you have 2 minutes to defeat Monoculus, and he respawns about every 3 minutes. So we spend more time goofing around than we do actually trying to kill him. Once he gets to level 3, Marasmus actually spawns every 60 seconds, but that fight is actually a lot more engaging. He has way more attacks, and how they change per level is a lot more dynamic. I feel like there's generally more strategy involved in how you fight Marasmus. But that's not to say there isn't strategy involved in fighting Monoculus too. But what is the best strategy to fight this eyeball monster man? Well, miniguns have the highest damage per second in the game, so that's a good start. But like Marasmus, or tanks in Man vs. Machine, Monoculus does have resistance to miniguns. Which does make sense. You're producing a constant damage output that has no need to reload, and you basically can't miss like you would with projectiles. Which would be why Monoculus takes 75% less damage from miniguns. Sentries are also a good choice, but he takes 75% less damage from them too. And then for seemingly no reason, Monoculus also takes 50% less from flamethrowers. But like, come on! Pyro can barely even reach Monoculus half the time, and the flamethrower's DPS is nowhere near as good as the miniguns. But I guess I'm 14 years too late to be complaining about that. However, despite the minigun and sentry's damage reduction against bosses, we did figure that they were still generally our best bet. Monoculus is immune to both damage ramp up and fall off, so you'll always be dealing the same damage regardless of range. And even with that damage penalty, the Brass Beast can deal up to a max of 108 damage per second. Of course, the Cone of Fire will cause you to miss some bullets at further ranges, but that's still a good and very consistent damage output. Engineers with their sentries will also produce a constant damage output, and with so many heavies chewing through ammo, we're going to need some dispensers too. So once again, despite the damage penalty, having a lot of engineers is still a good strategy. And of course, you can't really go wrong with a few medics. Aside from the quick fix, I think pretty much every other medigun does have its merits here. The Kritzkrieg, while still good, actually isn't quite as good as you might think, because Monoculus also resists 50% of critical damage, so crits will deal 2 times damage instead of 3 times. And luckily, we did realize before we were too far in that Monoculus is straight up immune to mini-crits. So the soldiers we had switched off the buff banner and instead to the battalion's backup, which is also helpful because the eye rockets that Monoculus fires are crits. And you might see those scouts in our server and think they're wasting their time, but no! The way you stun Monoculus is by going through his portal and using the crits gained from the underworld to do that. Normal crits won't have that effect, so you do have to go through the portal. And again, pretty early on, we realized that it wasn't worth it to have our slow heavies going through the portal, and that the time taken to do that was much better spent just shooting him. But we could have 1 or 2 scouts do that instead. They go through the underworld a lot faster and stun him a lot more often. So anyway, the first 10 levels are basically nothing special. And each time he levels up, Monoculus' firing rate and health go up. But even then, I didn't find myself dying very often. I guess he was usually distracted by someone else. But if Monoculus does get you in his sights, you're basically dead if you're using the Brass Beast. Monoculus will also enter an enraged state where his pupil turns red and he fires a lot faster. And he'll do this when he wakes up from stun, takes critical damage, or takes more than 300 damage in the last 5 seconds. So, as you can imagine, he was basically enraged all the time. This dude would basically spawn enraged. And apparently in the code, it's commented with crits piss me off, and heavy DPS pisses me off, which I think is funny. But it was at level 11 that we saw our first Monoculus is leaving in 60 seconds warning. Previously, we had killed him in under a minute each time. But from this point on, we would see that warning a lot more often. And if everyone crowds around Monoculus when he dies, his body, his eyeball body, will sit there for a good while before it explodes. And that's also kind of funny. And I don't know if this is a side effect of the truce mechanic or what, but we found ourselves getting stuck inside each other a lot more often than we should have.
We're stuck! Door stuck! I can't!
I remember not really liking the whole truce mechanic when they first added it in 2015, because it kind of made the fights too easy. But when you're doing this, it's basically a necessity. We'd be killing each other by accident all the time without it. And it's at level 18 that we technically get our first 30-second warning. But it's literally right before he died, so we're not too worried yet. By this point, we've more or less got it down to a science. We even have people calling out the teleport locations in voice chat. It's definitely getting harder, but we're also getting more efficient at it. Though we can't stop those 30-second warnings from coming more often. And just 4 levels later, at level 22, we get the dreaded 10-second warning. For that round, he was just teleporting from one side of the map to the other. And as you can imagine, we're mostly heavies and engineers who aren't exactly the most mobile. Monoculus would just get in spots that are hard to hit. The closer he spawns to the point, the better. But if he's behind the buildings or behind the cliff, it's not good. If the RNG is on your side, he won't teleport far, and even in the level 20s, if he's cooperating, it still makes it relatively easy. It's really not so much getting killed that's the problem, it's where he teleports. And thankfully, for the next few levels, we got much luckier. But by the late level 20s, we're getting down to the 10-second mark every time now. Though we did manage to do something we could not do the first time we tried this. We did this last year and only got to level 28. But this year, not only did we beat level 28, we beat level 29, we beat level 30, we beat 31 and 32, which actually went super well. But at level 33, Monoculus decides he wants to teleport from one side of the map to the other every time he does it. And for this round, by the 30-second mark, it was obvious we couldn't beat him. In fact, when he did leave, he left with a good chunk of health. So that was a bit anticlimactic. It didn't come down to the wire, he just easily beat us. But we did our best. 33 is a good level, and we beat last year's record by 5. With Marasmus, it really comes down to how fast you could find him when he hides to heal. If you could catch him fast enough, you could defeat him fairly easily for a while. But with Monoculus, it's really just a matter of time until his level of health becomes too much for you and you get a bad string of teleports. No matter how well you play, there will come a point where you just can't put out enough damage fast enough. Though I would bet that if we got lucky, we could maybe get him to level 40. But after that, I'm not so sure. And this took us 2.5 hours to get him that high, so I don't know how soon I want to try that again. It was fun though. With Marasmus, we tried with cheats, but I don't think I have time for that this year because, I mean, it's already Halloween, it's getting a little late to put this out. We are thinking about trying to do the Marasmus fight again, so if you are interested in that, you could join the Discord if you haven't already. But happy Halloween, thanks for watching, and a big thanks to the patrons, and yeah, I'll see you next time.